Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Inky Thoughts Podcast. Today, we're going to have a very special episode where we're going to be talking about, well, almost in a way, returning to tattoo history, but in a bit of a roundabout way. So we're going to be talking more generally about tattoo exhibitions at museums and stuff like that, and why it might be important to have more understanding and access to tattoo culture in that way. And I've brought along a guest since I neither work for museums, nor have I held any exhibitions of my own or curated anything in my life. So I felt it was best to bring along a guest that has some experience with this. Not only that, but not only has he curated one exhibition and he'll correct me in a bit because I'm so bad remembering where, but he's also been part of running another one at a museum in London. He's curated for an exhibition in London as well. Different places around the UK, but he's also formerly a tattoo artist himself, which is why I think the interest might have sparked. We're going to figure that out in a bit. Before I ramble on too much and throw all the stuff into different bags and shake it so nobody knows where anything is, Sean, will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Mads. Thanks for having me on. So, I'm Sean Colgrave. I work in the UK. I have curated two exhibitions. One a more tattoo art focus and one more of a tattoo history focus in London and Mansfield, respectively. I've also spoken to a couple of other museums who are interested in doing something kind of a couple of years down the line, just because of how long it takes for museum exhibitions to actually kind of get their foot in the door and sort out all of the right funding. And then kind of, as well as that, I teach tattooing, I tattoo myself, I kind of teach the art side of stuff, and I'm just writing a tourist guide to tattooing book to kind of, the idea is to talk to people who aren't tattooed, who maybe aren't in the industry, don't really have any idea of what's going on in the industry, and kind of explain to them all the cool stuff that we do and why it's important.
That's really fascinating because as I'm of course biased as a not just a tattoo lover but a sociologist, that I like when people like help people get the right lens to look at why we're into this. Because for us, it's anybody that loves tattoos, it's fucking apparent. Like nobody needs to ask anybody why do you love it. We all know why. As Matt put it in his Matt Lauder, to be more specific, put it in his latest book, and I'm paraphrasing here. If you have felt the allure, it's just magic to you. Like you just love it for that reason. But for others, it's good to have some help understanding this stuff. So I'm absolutely a fan of anybody putting that effort in. That's also partially what I'm doing with this podcast. It's not just for other tattoo nerds like you and me, Sean. It's also for others that are like, who are these freaks and why the fuck do they do it? And you might learn, and you could also learn from, I imagine, some of the exhibitions you put on.
Yeah, so it all kind of the history one was reinforced by what we found when we did the art exhibition. So initially, I only wanted to do it as an art exhibition. I wasn't interested in kind of sharing the history. I only wanted to share the art side of stuff. And I think it was because a little part of me thought people won't care. Like people don't care about that. They just want to see some cool pictures. So I was doing the art one down in London, and we were just over the kind of I say the road, but really I mean the river from Canary Wharf. So where all of the the big businessmen were, and I was finding like we had like quite a few people that were coming over from Canary Wharf, and I was expecting a load of tattooed people to walk in and kind of admire stuff and go, oh wow, that's really cool. I really enjoyed that. And while we did have some tattooed people, most of them were not tattooed. And they were kind of coming in and they were going, oh, why is this important? Why have you done this? This looks. I was focusing on American traditional work, so I got to explain how the beauty of American traditional is. So I started to see it almost as, obviously it's not anything like it, but it still has that kind of sensibility. Cubism. So if someone does cubism, if you're doing some cubism art, all you need to understand is the base forms of whatever you're drawing. You go, what's the minimum I need to put in place for someone to know what I've done? And then I started talking about that, like, American traditional drawings in the same way, to be like, you can stand at the other end of this gallery and you can tell me exactly what's on the other wall. Whereas if I got a picture of Taylor Swift that was the exact same size, it's the most recognizable person on the planet at the moment, and you wouldn't be able to tell me what was there. You might be able to go, it's a person, but you wouldn't be able to pick out the level of detail to go, oh, that's Taylor Swift. And from that, I was like, oh, I actually keep coming across this story of people coming to tattooing who I didn't think would want to be there, and then going, oh, help me understand it a bit more. Help me explain it. And when I then went to go on to do the museum in the Mansfield exhibition, the people that I was working with, so one curator had a couple of tattoos, and she just loved the idea of tattoos. Like, she was like, yeah, I really, really like them. I want to do something with it. And then the other guy, he liked the look of them, but was like, I have no idea. I just don't know anything about tattoos at all. So we started talking about like common misconceptions that the public have, and they were asking me as well. They were like, going, "Oh, is it true that this happened? Is it true that this is happening?" And I was like, "No, none of that's real. All of those are just fairy tales that you've."
But at least that's sort of useful in preparing the exhibition. That because if you'd all been really into tattoo history, you might have missed out on certain misconceptions you might have forgotten, because it's been a long time since you might, if you've ever held them yourselves, it might have been a very long time ago. So it's sort of a useful reminder, having to, even though it's also extra work, I suppose, having to educate the people that help you curate that exhibition.
Definitely, and it really helped me kind of like, I don't want to say dumb down what I was writing or what I was talking about.
No, but translate, I think it's a better word.
Yeah, it really helped me translate it. And even when I was back at university, I did my degree in kind of human geography and philosophy, and kind of even kind of going back then, I always hated when I was having a philosophical argument or a discussion, and everyone was they were more concerned with using really big words, and I was like, just keep it simple. Like, just like if you can put whatever you're saying in the most simplest, most layman term way, then you truly actually understand it. If you have to use these giant...
But it's also, it democratizes the information in a way as well. Or as Alyssa told me, it's part of knowledge mobilization, not being just able to, in an academic sense, say, oh yeah, I can talk about the social construction of tattoo narratives and how they affect the social genesis of people's own sense of an authentic self. But half the words there is going to run right over people's heads.
Yeah.
But being able to tell people that, but the way tattoos are permanent and helps you reflect on who you are, helps people also gain a greater sense of an authentic self.
Yeah,
also
definitely. So
that's much more understandable for a lot of people. I mean, sociology is a bit of a weird one, because a lot of words are already quite layman's terms, though there are also plenty of big words. But I've always been a much more fan of like embodiment sociology and, of course, tattoo sociology, where there's much more like directness, I would say. But that's also what I think in history sometimes, like even when you take a guy who we both know, Matt Lawler, we've already mentioned, even in his books, of course there's the odd massive word or really high level academic phrase or anything, but even Matt writes in quite an accessible way, I find, in much of his work.
And from talking to him, obviously, they are academic books, so I think even he knows, he's like, I wish I could dumb it down even a little bit more or take it down another level, but I have to write to a certain level because it's obviously an academic print.
But that's also exactly the space your exhibitions then take up, because that's even better accessibility for people who want to learn about this.
Yeah, like I definitely, I really admire Matt. It was, some initial videos from Matt that kind of made me think about tattooing as more than just tattooing. So I definitely don't want to step on his toes. Like, I'm not. I don't want to say I'm not interested in the history, because that isn't quite what I'm saying. But I'm like, what I enjoy talking about is the social side, like why we're tattooing and how it makes us feel better in our own bodies and all of that kind of stuff. And rather in 1875, this is how we were doing it. Like, I want to tell people because it's cool, but that's not my job. I don't want to tell people what we were doing. I want to talk to people about why we were doing it and what it's cool about.
Right. So you're more interested, much like sociology, in the more contemporary culture right now.
And
giving people more.
That is. Yeah, and it was something that kind of with all the exhibitions and everything, and I was trying to work out like what my story was and why I wanted to say certain things. And I remember back from when I was tattooing, like such a common thing is I ended up, I don't know how I ended up with this common client, but I ended up tattooing lots of like 70-year-old women. And, as like you're tattooing, like you go, how does your family think about this? Especially when it's the first tattoo, like, what do your parents think? What's your partner think? And so many times they would be like, oh, I really fancied this guy when I was 20 who had tattoos. But my dad always said if I'd got tattoos, back in the 60s or the 50s, he'd angle grind it off my arm. They'd kick me out the family or whatever. And then they'd go, but they're dead now, so I can do what I want. And it was that kind of sentence that made me go, oh, I didn't like, growing up, you just think, oh, people hate tattoos. But actually, from hearing them, they're like, oh, they didn't hate them. They just had to not have them because that's what society told them to do.
That's what I started learning as well, even from the very beginning of my academic career, researching tattoos. And even when I was just a nerd liking tattoos as a teen, and when I first started getting tattoos, most old people I've ever met that suddenly get tattoos or have a lot of tattoos, if they started late getting them, it's always been out of fear of some sort of social repercussion, which is sad because it shows the importance of our embodiment and how lost they felt. Often part of their narratives, I find, a part of the experience is that they haven't really been sure who they are. And suddenly, when they get more freedom and more autonomy, they learn, oh, fuck.
Yeah,
I like tattoos. I want that. And that then gives me even greater sense of autonomy. And suddenly they love tattoos, but they're in their 40s, and many of them, or the 50s or the 60s or even the 70s, and many of them, rather than ever regretting getting a tattoo, as I always say, I've met way more that regret never getting one.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why, as you say, because they feared, oh, my husband would divorce me, or oh, this guy wouldn't like me, or this woman would have thought I was a scumbag, or my parents would have disowned me. And there's all these this social anxiety of like, oh, what's going to happen to me if I get a tattoo? And then later on, nowadays, they figure out, oh, nothing, because I'm still me.
Yeah. Like, I mean, even just last night, I was on Reddit talking to people on Reddit, and they were going, oh, are hand tattoos still job stoppers? And people are still scared of them. I'm like, obviously,
It depends on where you are. In Denmark, it very much can be, depending on how far you go with them. But I mean, I've lived in the UK myself as well. In the UK, I wouldn't say they're job stopper anymore.
No, they're definitely not. Yeah, that's why I had to say. I was like, there's really a geography to it. A lot of my experience of like the US.
It depends more on the career path than what you do, and even there, it's rarely a job stopper anymore. I mean, I got served by bag tillers when I was living in Glasgow that had fucking visible tattoos. It would never happen here, but that was awesome.
My first manager out of kind of university had like full neck tattoos, full hand tattoos, and I remember seeing him, and I was like, this guy shouldn't be my manager. He's got like hand tattoos, he's got neck tattoos, and obviously, and I'm a tattooist, and I've got hand and neck tattoos. But I remember going, oh my god, this doesn't fit with the story that I've been told to believe.
Yeah, with what you've been told, like much like Leia Elson said when she was on my podcast, when she talked about it's a popular clip of mine where she talks about if she was asked as a kid to draw a scientist, it wouldn't be a woman with tattoos like herself. It would be a white man in a lab coat.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we all have been told, especially in our generation. We were probably the last that really got this hammered into the back of into our spines in Denmark of like, a policeman looks like this, a librarian looks like this, a teacher looks like this, a doctor looks like this. And now we're all figuring out, especially assisted by the younger generations and all us nerdy academic types, that's all socially constructed. It's bullshit. It doesn't mean anything. It's just ideas we've made into something more than they actually are.
Definitely. I remember when my mum first got her tattoos, and my dad. When I first got my first tattoo, I remember I was in Belgium when I got my first tattoo, and I remember calling my mum, going, "I'm back in 3 days. I've got a tattoo. You've got 3 days to convince my dad not to kill me, basically. Like, don't." Obviously, she managed to succeed. But then when my mum got her first tattoo, my dad grew up in the 80s and the 70s, and I remember that he used to say to me, like, if a woman had a tattoo, that meant she was a certain type of woman. And then my mum got her tattoo, and I kind of saw it in real time. He was like, well, she's not that type of woman because I've been married to her for 20 years, but my upbringing says that she is. And I'm like, and it's like, well, what do I believe? What do I believe? And obviously, ultimately, he was like, well, no, she's still my wife. She's still the person I love. The tattoo doesn't change it. But I remember he like wrestled with that for a good like couple of weeks. But like, I'm okay with it. Like, but some part of me tells me I shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's wild. It's these, like, for lack of a better term, cultural contradictions that sort of got you into wanting to help people learn more about
it. It is, yeah. It's, I started to think about my audience, and I was like, actually, this kind of, let's say cultural contradiction, these people that, haven't felt comfortable in their body and then go to tattoos for whatever reason. Ultimately, those are the people that I want to make, those are the people that I want to talk to. Those are the people that I want to do all this stuff for. So, and then it kind of all just kind of spiraled out from there, really.
But I kind of like that focus, even though it might have come to you as an epiphany when you talked about that London exhibition, that, this is actually better for the non-tattooed people. Because for the others, it's sort of just, a fun extra little, like, Easter egg, learning more about the culture and seeing how others react to it and stuff like that, especially with more contemporary exhibitions rather than history-oriented exhibitions. But for the others, it can be an absolute eye-opener, learning about who are tattooed people actually. What's about this art about? So absolutely fascinated with that. I did have a weird thought though, which is that type of exhibition, the challenge would be to have a tattoo artist as the ultimate gift shop on the way out.
That's the thing. I like, so I'm trying to do a tour in one for next year. I'm in kind of just the final stages of kind of finalizing it. And absolutely every venue that I've called up, they've always been like, "Are you going to tattoo at the venue?" And I'm like, I have to be like, "No, no one's going to be tattooing. Like, you don't need to worry about any of that." Like for a split second, for a bit, I started looking at it to be like, should I do that? Like, what's it going to be like? But the hassle of kind of getting
it's going to be a lot of permits you need to get and stuff like that, and
I agree. It would be awesome. It would be so cool to be the ultimate tattoo, the ultimate
it's
souvenir.
More in the it's more like in the hypothetical. I'm thinking about that. That would be the ultimate challenge to people of like, have you actually shifted your opinion? Are you now maybe going to get a tattoo? Here's your opportunity.
Yeah.
But it would also be difficult to cater to people's whatever taste they might gain in tattoos and whatever styles they might try to tattoo.
If I would have done it, if I could have done it, it would be a case of like almost like you put your arm down or your leg or whatever part you want to get tattooed, and I just
quick flash,
just kind of get the vibe. I'm like, this is the type of person you are. Draw something up, and that's what you've got. Like, it would be amazing to do something like that.
That would be interesting, but it would have to be somewhere permanent so you can make sure that the environment is correct and sanitary and stuff and everything, because moving it about, I get your concern. It's going to be such a hassle every time figuring out, okay, how are we actually going to do this safely? Whereas the exhibition can, of course, be way more malleable in that sense and easier to prop up at different venues that might be interesting.
Yeah, I always try and work with a couple of local tattoo artists at the same time. So, and just be like, these are the dates. Maybe you want to do some flash or kind of do something so we can kind of like cross pollinate and advertise as well. Because I always think that's good. Like people go to these exhibitions. Like I've got it booked in. Obviously, I've just come from my exhibitions, and I want to get a little souvenir tattoo. Like, or me and all the curators are going to go. We're going to get a little souvenir tattoo to be like, yeah, we did this. This was kind of our thing.
That's awesome. But I'm also always had the impression, at least having lived in the UK a couple of times and being from Northern Europe myself, that the UK is weirdly primed for this sort of thing. You seem much more in touch with how tattoos have sort of been part of the tapestry for a long time. It's absolutely the same sort of history, for example, here in Denmark, yet people seem way more disconnected with it than they do in the UK. Like the collective amnesia, as Matt has called it in his latest book, sort of is way stronger here in a way where people are like, oh, we didn't do that. Yeah, we did. We were just like the Brits in this way. You guys seem way more like, yeah, it was part of it, so let's go see an exhibition about it. There seems to be more of a willingness for that, because there has been exhibitions on tattoos in Denmark, but not for, I can't think of one of any for a while now. I have been to some, but it's a while since any actual museum has been like, hey, come and see what tattoo art is actually about, or here, learn about the history of it here. There's, of course, some studios that have their own, like, historical collections and stuff like that. But outside of that, there's not much here. Whereas in the UK, it's rare, but they seem more, for lack of a better term, they seem to like and be willing to go to stuff like that way more.
I think there's a good sense of kind of tattoo community, especially between the tattooed people. That I was at London last week for the 70th anniversary of the London Tattoo Society, and people came from all over the UK. So I mean,
talk about history as well.
Yeah, exactly. We drove like 3 hours down to it, and I know people who drove kind of further to go and meet, because it is. I think in the UK at least, there is a big sense of kind of like pride for people who are tattooing. They are like, there is a big history here, and it does feel a lot like a family. Whereas the anecdotal evidence I've seen from kind of like in the US and other places in Europe, it seems very like just like small little villages. Whereas here, the whole community feels like I could go anywhere else in the UK, find another tattoo shop, and we could just what about this tattoo? And we could get on. But I don't know why that is. I think some of it is kind of from like the 70s and the 80s, where tattooing really did become a stigma. And kind of like the biker community and like the motorcycle community kind of like kept it going. And I think that sensibility is kind of like bled into everything else. That almost like motorcycle gang, almost like we're a family, and that's.
Well, I also meant that regular people, for lack of a better term, the normies out there, they seem more willing to go and like go to an exhibition about tattoo culture, for example.
I think probably that's our celebrities.
Might be. Yeah.
We have a lot of. I mean, not even just necessarily UK celebrities. Obviously, a celebrity these days is celebrity. But people like Post Malone, Machine Gun Kelly, all of that kind of stuff. Like David Beckham. I remember when David Beckham got his tattoos in the kind of like they got like the crucifix on his back and everything, and then everyone was getting that. I think we've always been like, I want to be like my hero, this football player, and we've always been also, quick to jump on tattoo trends.
There's also always a curiosity to some extent, which is also definitely present here as well. I remember it wasn't unpopular. There's a tattoo exhibition I went 2 years ago here in Denmark. It was quite popular as well, at least to some extent. I think this curiosity people sometimes have about what's different, which we then, thinking about it now, we sort of have to grab that opportunity sometimes if we want to get at the stigma and that. Because I very much want to be clear here to any other heavily tattooed lovers of tattoos like myself and Sean. I'm not saying I'm trying to fucking bring more people into the club. That happens naturally. I'm not trying to get everybody into a tattoo trend or anything like that. But if you want to be able to live, and especially with how many people of all walks of life love tattoos and have always loved tattoos, it's important that people can go about their lives not feeling like they get prohibited from it because they love tattoos.
Yeah.
And these, I find museum exhibitions especially are a great opportunity at unaliving a lot of this fucking stigma and prejudice.
Yeah.
Because they're just, along with their own thoughts and all the prejudice that just get reproduced by everybody else that have, basically swallowed it raw ever since the 60s and the 70s.
I think as well, we've lost quite a few kind of like I call them like the old boys of tattooing, especially in the UK over the last kind of 4 or 5 months, and there are obviously their stories go. with them. And some of them are very kind of personal, private stories, and I'm like, yeah, they should actually probably go with them because they shouldn't be shared. And those are like private memories. But there's other things where I'm like, if this isn't preserved, it's gone. There we go. We just don't know anymore, and that's a whole piece of history lost.
I mean, that's how I think about Lal Hardy, having interviewed him as well. Like, and you probably met Lal at the.
I've met him a few times now.
Yeah.
It's all it still doesn't feel real every time I meet him, and it's like, oh, he's like the lad from Nottingham. I'm like, yeah, I'm the lad from Nottingham. You're right. And
he's a great guy.
Rambo. I've met Rambo several times now, and he's. I always enjoy talking to him. I think he's a lovely guy. He probably puts on a bit more of a bravado than he needs to, but he's such a sweetheart.
But I do hope, especially with Lal, that his stuff is preserved, because he's one of those guys that, I mean, even when I do for a podcast, I was so blown away positively by how he's not one of those old jaded guys from the old brigade that's like, oh yeah, all the new stuff is just shit. He's very much an optimist in that way about the art, but he's also very much keeping certain aspects of his old punk background alive in that way, but being like, well, it was for all of us who were different. It's not just the bikers or the punks. It was fucking everybody who wanted to be a bit different or to be more true to themselves in a way. And it's nice to hear somebody talk like that, because sometimes when you hear people from our generation or a bit older, they talk about it like, oh, let's get back to it. It was just about slapping a flash on the arm and nobody gave a shit. But the thing is, even when it was mainly flash, it was not just like that. The self-expression thing sort of came first, and then tattooing evolved to be able to encompass it better in a strange way.
Lal is great to talk to about that. He's not in any way disillusioned. He's like, we might go, oh, there's too many shops, there's too many artists, but at the same time, this is progress, and this is what ultimately, if we all went back 20 years ago, this is what we all wanted. We wanted to be
exactly.
We wanted easier machines. We wanted to not have to make needles. We like
exactly. It's always strange looking from the outside in, especially with the academic background I have, where you are like looking just at a recent history and going like, but this is what you wanted, and now you have it, and now you're like, we don't want it.
But I think it's a lot of the new people that are going, oh, I miss the old days, and but they weren't actually in the old days. They've got this, because I look at it sometimes and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew how to make my own needles. I wish I knew how to make my own coil machine. I wish I knew, I was still using an acetate for a stencil and I was putting carbon in it and using Vaseline. But I guarantee if you put me back in that position and I had to do that, after a day I'd be like, I hate this. Give me back the quality of life that we have now. And I think there definitely is that rose tinted.
But Lal said that in the best way possible when he was on here. He said, well, anything that makes it more efficient, it gives you more time to actually tattoo, is a great bit of progress. Even if we might miss some of the stuff we used to be able to do, it ultimately gives you more tattoo time, that you don't have to make needles, that you don't have to use slower methods to create stencils and stuff like that, and all this stuff.
Definitely. Obviously, Sailor Jerry obviously kind of brought purple in. That was like his thing, and it's like, if we didn't want progress, he wouldn't have brought purple.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of pet peeve of mine. But absolutely love allying with historians of this sometimes, like Matt, because the whole thing is, as his books have shown as well, that innovation, progress, and diversity are always how tattooing ultimately survived. And it's always how it developed into a better version of it. And all the resistance that's always there are people that are afraid of being left behind in a sort of, to use sociology, they're afraid of being alienated in a way by not being able to themselves change to suit how things are evolving, and not keep up with it. But the thing is, most people will be able to, in a sense, if they just keep an open mind to it. And I think it does. This is just a pet peeve of mine. I'm digressing a bit here. I'm terribly sorry, but a pet peeve of mine. I even wrote an article for Ink magazine about this. That might be out by the time this is out. a pet peeve of mine is that if we actually want to honor the legacy and history of tattooing, we need to embrace the diversity of the culture today.
Yeah.
Because that's what they wanted back in the day as well. Like, Matt showed proof in his latest book of how Ed Hardy, who's often lauded as like, oh yeah, he tattooed Hell's Angel, he was one of the old guys. He hated the fact he had to tattoo Hell's Angels guys. He didn't like the image tattooing was getting in the 60s and 70s of being a biker thing, because he always saw it as a thing for everybody.
Yeah, like all of like, you know, we've got like the Bristol Tattoo Site and the London Tattoo Society over here. They form to show people we're not all ruffians and hooligans.
Exactly.
We're doing it because it's an art form, you know.
And then some people that are not too versed in the history, which is also where exhibitions like yours can come in, sometimes pull them out like they're like, oh yeah, look how tough they used to be. And like, no, these were also artsy kids doing tattooing.
yeah. I remember one of the old guys I used to work with, and I remember asking him, I was like, why did you get into it, basically? And he was like, I was as a kid just like drawing skulls. I just draw skulls everywhere, and then eventually I just started drawing skulls on people. Like that's he was always like, just like drawing monsters, and I like drawing skulls, and I like drawing lightning bolts, and you know.
But I think that's
cool
exactly
like that. Yeah.
The thing people need to know sometimes, who are quick to still, because no matter what people say, ask any social scientist with some expertise on it, there's still quite a bit of lingering stigma and prejudice out there. Even if in places like the UK and the US, job stoppers aren't the same way anymore, or aren't job stoppers in the same way anymore, I should say. It still is there. And I love what exhibition like yours does, because that is exactly how you show them, like, no, these are nerds, they're artsy kids. They might look different from what you usually classify in that way, but they are that. They love researching their special interests within the field, figuring out their own style, doing art even outside of tattooing many times, in all the different generations. That's artsy kids. If I ever had to call it like that, that's what they are. You know, it's not fucking just bikers and all they care about is like, oh no, tattooing is just the way I get by and earn my fucking wheels, and then I go out and bash skulls. It's not,
I think there is still some of that
there's
image.
Definitely guys out there like that, sure, but that would be like defining anybody by the minority within it. Like, it's not what it is. It's not what it was.
Exactly. Yeah, not every person in finance is, you know, Wolf of Wall Street, and you know, like, I'm sure there are people that are like that, but not all of
Absolutely.
them. You know.
But yeah, exactly. But what is it? What do you do specially in? I mean, I know. Talk to you a little bit now. You seem also more interested, as we spoke about, in the more contemporary exhibitions, for lack of a better term. What is it you try to do there to make it educational for people? I guess there's some specific stuff you focus on.
Yeah, so the stuff I focus on is kind of how to read, and I always focus on American traditional, because growing up, that was always the art style, the tattoo style that everyone told to me, like, that's cartoony.
It's also forever popular to some extent. Like, it never goes away.
It's cartoony. Whereas if I see a really nice black and grey realism, I can tell you it's good. I don't really need to see the source material. I'm like, all right, that looks like a person. That's good. Like, I don't need to argue or convince someone if that's good or bad. Like as an artwork piece. But you know, a Taz tattoo, for instance, or like a swallow with a mum banner. That I feel like. It was, and it's just those are the styles that I like, so it happens with that. So there's definitely that talking about that. And then the other thing I do is I put on workshops where I teach children kind of the forms and like how to look at that, kind of get everything ready, and how to spit shade, which is always really good. Kind of getting like 12 7 to 10-year-olds and getting them all sit down. Right, we're going to teach you how to make some flash now, and we'll do the proper spit shade, and I get all my drawing inks out. And then at all the exhibitions, I get to kind of put them up on the wall, and it's like we have our own little flash wall, but it's all kind of designs from young kids. And then a few times I've been able to actually do that in like art colleges, where I can expand on it a little bit more. So there's a couple of art colleges that I've been to where they've gone, they've, I guess, listened to the students, which is great. You know, these students have come in with the idea that they want to be a tattoo artist. So they're like, why don't we just teach the art side of tattooing? Like, we're not teaching how to tattoo, because that's not our place. But
that would take a lot longer as well.
Yeah. So I get to go in and I get to talk about stuff like the biology of it. So like the flow of the body and why certain pieces fit in better places. And, if you put a really short piece on someone's collarbone, it's going to really distort how their body looks. It's going to really like bring the eye in. So I get to talk about kind of the more technical side of tattooing that actually people who don't tattoo don't realize. I was talking to my mum about it the other day, and I was saying, if you do, I can make your leg look really, really long by putting the right tattoo on it, or I can make your chest massive by. And she was like, I didn't, and I just drew it and I just showed her. She was like, never thought about that. Like I didn't think about how a simple drawing could really alter our perception of a person.
But also one's own perception of oneself.
Yeah,
which is, I think, an aspect most, again, for lack of a better term, and because I like calling them it sometimes, normies don't think about how. I mean, that's what I like to teach, for example, through this podcast, that it does something really positive for people that really love tattoos to be tattooed.
Yeah.
Of course, there are people that regret tattoos, but like I actually just handing, funny enough, I'm doing a lot of writing lately, but just handed an article in about tattoo regret. And the thing is, for most of us who are really into tattoos and heavily tattooed like yourself or moderately tattooed like me and want to be covered, regretting one or two tattoos doesn't mean regretting being tattooed. That's still really important to our sense of self, being tattooed. For people that might have just followed trends and might just, done it for fashion, that's a different story. They might completely regret being tattooed once the trend fades or something like that. But the fact here, even though I might have modeled it a bit, is that I like, and it seems you're teaching the same here, teaching people that this is important to us, exactly because it also makes us feel more authentic.
Definitely,
it makes us feel like we are a true sense of self that can't be taken away from us. Bodily autonomy in a way is what it feels
definitely
like, which goes double so for queer people and women that are tattooed. They often especially feel a reclaiming factor to being tattooed, taking the power back from the patriarchal constructions that falls upon them.
That's something I'm trying to put in my book, about that. So I'm going to age myself a little bit. I grew up watching shows like Miami Ink and LA Ink, where every tattoo had a story, and then I really moved away from that to be like, not every tattoo has a story. And then as I'm older now, I'm like, actually, every tattoo has a story. It doesn't mean like the design's super important. Like I've got a huge
it doesn't mean
tattoo
it's tied into the design either. There's like a distinctive like, this shark I got here was because I was out at the Great Barrier Reef swimming with sharks. Doesn't have to be that kind of story, but there's no such thing as a meaningless tattoo or
I've got
without a story.
I've got a giant tiger on my tummy, and it's for no reason other than I don't like my tummy. I feel fat, so I've got a big tiger on there, so it hides my fat belly behind a nice piece of art. That's the meaning behind it. And I've seen people, as you were talking obviously about like kind of people transitioning where they've got really kind of like gender affirming tattoos. And then I was thinking about it on the other side. Sometimes you see bodybuilders and they'll get a certain type of tattoo, but again, that's gender affirming.
I mean, that's also
I'm a big man, so I'll get a lion.
Yeah, exactly. To use Butler in a way almost, especially when they do it in sort of an almost bodybuilder subculture way where it's very specific tattoos that get done. It's almost like a gender performative sort of thing where they want to make this hyper masculine thing in a very specific way. Like they want to be tan and they want to have black and grey tattoos with manly stuff and all.
Definitely, and it's I think it is somewhat magical. How
if I could do an exhibition, it would be exactly that kind of thing. I would do for a museum, but it would be with people very inspired by it. I think it is an international thing, but I struggle to recall the actual English name, but it's called the Human Library. I don't know what it's called in English actually, but it translates to the People Library in Danish. And you basically go and take out a person and talk to them about who they are to sort of fight back against prejudice and stigma. And you could for a time borrow a tattooed person from it as well, which is what inspired me to it. I would love to do that for a museum, have tattooed people there for people to talk to them about them, because there's almost as many ways, especially with us who are really into tattoos, of being a tattooed person as there are tattooed people.
Yeah,
So it's nice to
definitely.
learn this.
Like one thing I was thinking about for when I did like the art tours was I'd like at least on the opening nights to be like, it'd be good to get a couple of like heavily tattooed models who were like happy to kind of like stand a little bit in their underwear and allow people to kind of see how their body changes with certain tattoos, or like even get the chance to kind of go, well, I've got that tattoo, well, I've got this tattoo, and all of that. I've got a really it looks bad, like it's a little square with little circles tattoo on my leg, and I usually tattoo with shorts, so many clients were like, you're a tattoo artist, that's a really bad tattoo, why do you have that? And I'm like, it's the first drawing my lad did of me, like it doesn't look good, it's not in any way aesthetically pleasing, like, but every time I look at it I'm like, oh, it's and I remember laughing at it because he drew, even though he had the full piece of paper, he drew a picture of me and him in a picture. So it's like it looks like a Polaroid.
Very much a hat on a hat in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a hat on a hat. Yeah, but it's obviously it means a lot to me. But it's not a good tattoo. Like I look at it, I'm like, it's not a good design. There's no aesthetically pleasingness to it. But it's.
But that's also, I think, an important thing. I think your type of exhibition sort of teaches people that what is a good tattoo is way more subjective in a way.
Yeah.
Because if you take somebody in who has an art background and walk them around a tattoo convention, they might point at different stuff and say, oh, that's not very aesthetically correct. That's not correct art. But the thing is, even stuff that might be wrong in an art exhibit could still be a great tattoo.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the other part of it, it being on a person's body, is that if that person enjoys it and gets some level of joy out of it, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, then it's a good tattoo. To some extent, like we can always argue about whether it's a technically great tattoo or whether it's a very cool design or very artistically anything, but ostensibly, if you enjoy it, it's a good tattoo for you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can distinguish between like a technically well done tattoo can still be a bad tattoo. Like if the person hates it, like it.
Yeah, if the person for some reason or other hates it, of course it's more rare. I will happily admit and confess to that with really great, well done and great tattoos, but it can still happen for some reason or other that somebody hates that tattoo, even if it's really well done or really beautiful to artistically speaking. Because of whatever else is going on in their life, or might have gone on between them and the artist, or might have gone on with them and what the tattoo stands for, the narrative, or what the narrative is tied to.
100%.
They can still hate that tattoo,
and that's the beauty of art. Like I'm not like I hate Dali. I can't stand it. I hate every Dali piece I've ever seen. But I'm never going to stand there and
honestly,
go,
he's a big
bad.
fan either.
Yeah, I'm never going to say he's a bad painter. Like, he's amazing. Like, his technical ability and kind of vision is fantastic, but it's just not for me. Like, and I'm never going to come around and go, yeah, you know what? Actually, I like it now. But it's like subjectively, it's not for me. But objectively, I'm never going to turn around and go, he was bad. Like, he was amazing.
Well, that's the same with me. I'm not one that goes and listens to. You mentioned her earlier, Taylor Swift songs, but I'm not going to go around and say, "Oh no, she's shite at singing."
Yeah, millions of people can't be wrong. Like,
Also, even just subjectively listening to her, it's not the singing that's the problem with me. It's just not my kind of music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the thing. I think that's a very good point. But do you go out of your way also to try and elicit that sort of thinking from people when they go to the exhibits?
Yeah, I try to talk about kind of what makes a good tattoo and that kind of thing, like the technical things that make something a good tattoo. But I like to. Ultimately, it is a subjective art form. Like the same as any art form, it is subjective. But I like to. Also, in Mansfield, we had a big piece where we interviewed loads of people from the area who'd been tattooed. We had all of their photos. We had some of the stories behind some of their tattoos. And all of them, obviously, they loved every single tattoo they had. They loved it enough to put it on screen and have it projected massive, And on a technical level, I remember watching some of those going, that is a bad tattoo. Like, just the lines are wonky. There's some blowouts. Like objectively, it's a bad tattoo. But people are there going, I love that. I love that they've got that for that reason. I love that they've done that. And
that's another interesting bit you get confronted with. Sorry, we got a crow in my throat. But you must get confronted with this quite a lot just by curating these exhibitions and being part of putting them on, because there's a very different way people like you and I read tattoos to how people outside of it read tattoos.
Yeah.
And I've had people loving some of the tattoos I have. I think are my worst done tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
And not like some of the tattoos I think are most artistically pleasing on me.
Yeah.
Which is the thing about... It's the same difference I imagine from people that like talk to a beer connoisseur and then talk to an idiot like me who just likes my regular lager.
Yeah.
Where I wouldn't know the first thing of how to appreciate the stuff they like.
It's so alien to me. Like you see sommeliers when they come in and they go, "Oh, this has got hints of," and I'm like, "Does it? Okay, if you say so." Like
exactly, and that's for us. We look at the completely different thing because we know more of the tattoo culture that goes around it and goes behind it. So we're like, oh, that's a technically well done tattoo, and I like what they did there and that style and that style. And they might come in somebody else and go like, oh no, I like the surrealism of this. We're there thinking, yeah, it's surreal, all right, but I'm more interested in how the color play is, right?
Yeah. There is a degree of that, and I think over time, especially recently, I have kind of been able to. I guess I kind of had to check myself a little bit and kind of put some of my, I don't say it's not quite ego, but like my expertise and my knowledge and my like, well, that's a technically bad tattoo. Yeah. And just be like, well, actually you like it. So it's not on my body. It really doesn't matter. Like
it's also very interesting in that way because it also gives access for people to like, one could say if you curated only tattoos you found aesthetically pleasing, people would only see one very narrow slice of tattoo culture. Mm-hmm. And artistry in your exhibition. Mm-hmm. So you give them much more of a broader spectrum of be like, well, we just spoke to people.
Yeah.
And let them show you the tattoos they love.
Yeah, definitely. It's that feels an honor as well to kind of get shown certain tattoos. You're like, if it's, I don't know, it does feel like people are sharing a bit more of a part of you than just, oh, I like this, like, the reasons behind some of the tattoos. It feels like you're trusted with something, like, and that feels nice.
Like you're sort of led into their diary in a way.
Yeah.
You're allowed to read a few pages almost in a way when people get into some of the reasonings and motivations and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And when the exhibition was on, I went like 4 or 5 times, and I even though my picture was on there and I was on the video and everything, I just kind of like listened to what people were saying, and then every now and then I'd step in and be like, "Hi, I'm the curator. Do you want any additional information or anything?" But because Mansfield is a miners' town predominantly, or was a miners' town, I did a lot of focus on kind of like mining tattoos and that kind of like
more working class
history. And even that, so obviously if you're in a cave-in, got a bit of coal dust in you, like ultimately that's a tattoo. Like it's very similar to how we would have tattooed you. So you did get kind of like blue dots in your arms and that kind of stuff. And I was overhearing people going, "Oh, I didn't even know that's why my granddad looked like that." Obviously this is a really big part of him that he was in like cave-ins and stuff like that. And they were like, I'd noticed the blue marks on like his face or on his arms or anything, but I'd never stopped to ask and go, why are you covered in these blue dots? Like, what's going on here? So it was cool to share that side of the history. Like, even though it's like a tangential to a tattoo, it's cool. And then like I'd go into doctor surgeons for a few, because I had a few surgeries around the time, and they were like, "Oh, what do you do? What do you know?" And I'm like, "Oh, I do like share some tattoo history." And I was talking to them about, obviously, if you're from Denmark, you'll be aware of like Tattoo Ole, and they were doing
of course,
they were doing areola tattoos in like from like 1904, and I'd be saying that to like doctors, and they'd be like, what do you mean tattoos were doing this 120 years ago? Like they thought that they were like, oh, look at us, we're great.
It is wild how people can sometimes forget how old even, for lack of a better term, modern tattooing is.
Yeah.
Probably more correct term, electric tattooing is. Like,
yes.
People forget how old that is even.
Yeah.
And compared to how old tattooing itself is, that's a drop in the bucket, man.
yeah, exactly. Like,
but
I speak to a few people, and like in the UK, like pre the word tattoo, it was often called like pricking. I talked to them, they'd be like, "Oh, but tattooing's only been around in the UK for like 200 years," and I'd be like, "No, that's just how long we've been using the name tattoo.
That's the word tattoo that has only been around for that long."
yeah, and they'd be like, "Oh." Like even yesterday was VE Day, and obviously they're talking about a military tattoo, so the sound like a drum makes, and I was going, yeah, it's the same origin of the word for where the word tattoo comes from, and my mum was like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. Like I never realised that. I never made the connection that we have two things in the UK that are both called tattoo, and they essentially make the same noise, which.
That is interesting because I always wondered because I've even lived in Scotland and I heard about the Edinburgh tattoo and I was just always like, why the fuck is it called? I was getting angry at times because I thought I had a grasp of the English language. What the fuck is this thing? It's nothing to do with tattoos.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first saw the poster. When I was like 17 up in Edinburgh. I was like, oh, tattoo convention, brilliant. I'm gonna go there. And then I went to go get tickets. I was like, oh, it's a military thing. That seems weird.
Yeah, it's a military exhibit. That would have been disappointing. I mean, you might have found the odd tattoo, but probably not many on display. They wear quite the ceremonial garb, I would say. But it must be fun for you as well. I mean, at least that's the sense I'm getting, being this intermediary. Like
it is.
This sort of guide in a way for people to learn more about tattoo people and tattoo art.
Yeah, and that's what I've tried to kind of position myself as. Like I just want to be that cool guy that's like, hey, have you seen this really cool thing over there? Like, you want to, like, I'll give you like some surface like TLDR, and then you can really go deep dive and go down the rabbit hole. But I
think that's smart. But I also like that it's somebody like you doing it because, as I mentioned earlier, I did go to a tattoo exhibition in a museum in Denmark years ago. I think I was only 24 at the time, so it's over 11 years ago. But even at the time, just being in the middle of finishing my master's degree and researching tattoos as a sociologist, I knew so much about tattoos that the guide actually ended up getting educated by me because he just worked for the museum and had just been given a script to talk about the exhibit. So I ended up educating him on tattoo history and tattoo culture instead. That's why I think it's way better that, in a weird sense, it's cool that this is coming from somebody who is from the tattoo world, so to speak. Because the other people would never be able to translate it correctly.
Yeah, I think that definitely does help. Before I started doing this, I was of the opinion like the tattooists were all fine, everyone was all cool, and it was like museums didn't want to work with them. And then when I started talking to museums, there was actually a lot of like, yeah, we would love to work with them, but we don't know how to talk to them because they're so much. It very much feels like they're the cool kids table, and we don't know what to do. So then I got to go like, they want to work with you. Do you want to work with them? Brilliant. Let's do something. And I think that's how kind of my work with Jay and the Liverpool Tattoo Museum came about. Mansfield, like, we want to do something. And I reached out to kind of Jay, and he was like, yeah, if the story is about getting people who aren't tattooed to understand a little bit more about it, like I'm all for it. That's kind of how all of the artifacts for that exhibition came about, which was nice.
I think that's also exactly what people from the tattoo world want to work with museums and probably get connected through people like you. They ultimately do want that. In a sense, they want people to understand it better. Even if they don't want it to get tattoos, they do want them to understand it better in some sense. And the disconnect that's been there sometimes, because I know that as an academic myself, people don't want to talk to academics because they remember what academics basically
Yeah, yeah,
said about tattooing back in the 70s and 80s, and that
yeah,
still lingers today to some extent. It's
yeah.
getting better though, but that stigma's carried for a long time, especially when it comes to museums, where it's just like, oh, they're never going to put this in there because
Yeah.
they don't find it valuable or high class or high art or the right kind of
And
culture.
a lot of people who are really like prominent in tattooing, if obviously they've dedicated their entire life to it, like it's more than just a love; it is their life.
Yeah.
You know, it must be scary to go to somebody that you think you're going to get a no off and say, "Hey, is my life important enough for you to do something with?" You know, you don't want to go to and ask that question. Like, it has to be scary.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
But also just with how there's been this divide, at least with I would almost say misunderstanding that happened in the 60s and 70s, where it became more like people started thinking it was mainly for, people in the fringes of society. Yeah. And with that sort of also came this divorce of tattooing from like high society mentality to some extent, as Matt has also talked about in his book. And that's probably why people still have the mentality today of like, oh, should we have this in a museum? Is tattoo art not a bit more like street art or something like that? Because the difference with the same thing goes for street art. That could also do really well in a museum, because museums are about teaching culture and art and all the different aspects of it. So of course it belongs in there. It's more of us that have created this socially constructed disconnect of saying, oh no, tattooing, that's more like conventions and like studios and that.
Definitely.
But it's also a thing that is beautiful, and it is art as well, as much as it's a craft. And of course it would do well in an art museum as well. And it also, as Matt is adamant about teaching people in his books, it teaches you something about people as well, understanding the ways they artistically express themselves and what mediums they use. And tattooing is one of those mediums used for self-expression and artistic self-expression.
Yeah, definitely. It's always the stories when I was in the exhibition. It was always like the pieces that had the story attached to it that everyone was a little bit more focused on. So we had a machine that had been owned by a World War II soldier who'd been captured at Dunkirk, so everyone was like really interested in that piece. And we had a bit of preserved human skin, which I think the morbidity of that was it intrigued a lot of people. They were like, "Oh wow, like are you allowed to show that?" I'm like, well, clearly we're allowed to show that because you're looking at it. But I know up in Edinburgh, the Royal Tattoo Surgeons Hall, they've got loads of preserved tattoo skin. But then sometimes do we show it? Do we not show it? Is there a market for it? Do people want to come and look at it? And I think
they would be absolutely gobsmacked if they ever exhibited those skins.
And that's the thing. I think
how many people would be in there.
There's a little bit of they're just scared to kind of put their foot out and see if people are going to.
I hope one day do, because I know Matt's seen them, and I know other people with more access in that sense have seen them at times and are privy to look at them. But I would absolutely love to see that.
I went to it
because it's fun to get this direct, view of how. I mean, of course, they won't look as they did on live skin as such, but it's still a window into what did it actually look like, and much more of a tangible idea of that than any photograph can give you.
Definitely, yeah.
It's fascinating stuff, man. But I've been keeping you for a while now, Sean. So here at the end, I always like to wind down a bit. I mean, we don't really need to. We've had quite a laugh and quite a nice time, but I always ask a more light-hearted question here at the end. And for you, I've sort of thought about what would be your dream exhibition. If you had unlimited funds, so to speak, if you could do any kind of exhibition you wanted, what would be your dream exhibition to put on regarding
my dream exhibition? Oh man, that is hard.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
kind of the opposite track, I know, but yeah.
I couldn't tell you what my dream exhibition would look like, but I know where it would be, and it's not that the gallery. I mean, it is quite a prestigious gallery, but it was just growing up. It was always the gallery that I enjoyed going to, and I just love the building and the space. So I would love something in the Tate Modern
Right.
that had a little bit more of an interactive element. If it was big, there was, and the name is failing me, but it was I say a few years back. I don't remember how many years back, but there was an art exhibition where you essentially put your arm through a hole in the wall and you were just tattooed, and something like that. Within the Tate Modern, and then like showing all of this fantastic artwork, kind of contemporary artwork, would be amazing. And like kind of like deconstructed tattoo machines and that kind of stuff. Like there's some really, really amazing tattoo machines out there that I do almost consider them working sculptures. They're fascinating. They're slow. I saw one the other day that literally was like the chattering teeth, like the coil. It was a coil machine using the chattering teeth, and I was like, wow, that's
incredible.
Like I would hate to tattoo with it because it would be so noisy, but it's just
it's still fascinating.
It's cool. It's just undeniably cool. But yeah, I think somewhere in the Tate Modern, almost like with a live art piece, I would love to do that. I think that would be a dream come true.
I think that is also a way that would really like give the greatest outcome possible, because anything interactive with tattooing, that's why I always recommend non-tattoo people go to conventions if they get a chance, because it's just a different thing experiencing tattoo people when we are like just relaxed and in our element.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in an exhibition like that, you can easily learn a lot about what attracts us to it, about the craft, about the artistry, but also learn about the people behind it. And that would be beautiful.
Definitely.
I mean, I truly hope you get to do that one day.
Yeah, it would be great. It would be
by
great.
yourself or allied with the right people. I don't care, but I hope you get to do an exhibition like that one day. I would happily, if I'm able, go to an exhibition like that.
I'll invite you when it happens.
I would even go to London, and I'm not a fan of going to London to see that. Way too busy a city for me, London, and I'm a city guy, and I still find London too busy.
It is a very busy city. Fortunately, when I tend to go there, I try to pick not quite the off-peak hours, but I try to kind of go the lesser months when it's not as super busy. But yeah.
Well, Sean, it's been lovely having you on. And here at the end, first of all, let me thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've loved talking about your work with curating and tattoo exhibitions and working in that sense to bridge the gap between non-tattoo people and tattoo artistry and culture. Please let people know where they can find more about your exhibits and what you're doing, and where they can find more about you.
Everything is literally just my name at Sean Colgrave. So that's where I am predominantly found, like on Instagram. You can find, I've got some published works in kind of Inked magazine as well as Mads. So you can find me there.
Quite a great article actually, or two in Ink magazine.
Yeah, it was. I think it just came at the right time. Obviously, Machine Gun Kelly had just unveiled his bodysuit, and
it was a great article on it.
Yeah, I think that was the first time I was like, "Oh, this is a sculpture work. Like, it really does fully change the body shape."
I think that was both of our first time being in Ink magazine. That one issue there, actually.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember you going, "Oh, like," I'm like, "I'm in it," and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm also in it as well." Yeah. But yeah, it's so yeah, everything is on Sean Colgrave. Any updates for galleries and tours, obviously I kind of put through there and like link everything, and then hopefully in the next year, 18 months, my book should be out as well. So
fantastic.
Obviously, yeah.
Is that what's called the
at the moment? I think I'm calling it the Tourist Guide to Tattooing. Okay. So I think I'm pretty confident that's where I'm going to go. I like that
title, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, even if just as a working title, I kind of like that title because it is a foreign country to people that don't get it. So
exactly. Yeah. And I kind of am writing it almost as like a travel guide. You know.
Nice. I like that.
So
I like that a lot.
Look over here if you want to see this stuff, and look over there if you want to see that.
I look forward to seeing that book come out. I must admit. Well, to anybody watching or listening in, thank you for tuning into this. And once again, thank you so much, Sean. Mm-hmm. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Cheers.
Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode with the awesome Sean Colgrave. I had such a blast talking with Sean. It's fun to see this other side of how tattoos can be used to teach about culture and embodied identity in a museum setting and why they indeed do belong in a museum. Many of you might have caught the little nod to Indiana Jones there with the question in the title, does it belong in a museum? Which very much, of course it does, because museums are a way to teach both about history but also about culture in a way that people can really find tangible and manageable. So yeah, Sean's creating a lot of accessibility while teaching people a lot about tattooing and tattooed people. So yeah, admire a lot of what Sean does. Next time though, we're going back to my favorite sub-series of the podcast, Beyond the Gate, with my first Southeast Asian, I hope I say that right, tattoo artist on the podcast. The lovely Nikki is going to be here to talk about how her own ethnic background mixed in with her upbringing in the UK and everything has inspired her way of tattooing and the style she has, and how she thinks it's all meshing it together with modern contemporary tattooing and the culture around it. So yeah, it's going to be a great episode talking about diversity in the tattoo community once again, as I always love to do. And I hope you guys will look forward to me and Nikki's chat. So yeah, I'll see you around.